The gunshot echoed through the empty corridor like a death sentence. Kang Min-jun pressed his hand against the bleeding wound in his side, his expensive suit now soaked in crimson. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled through the abandoned corporate building, leaving a trail of blood on the marble floor. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, each drop a reminder that Seoul had become a graveyard for men like him tonight. Another shot rang out. Glass shattered somewhere behind him. They were close. He ducked into a stairwell, his leather shoes sliding on the wet concrete. The building had been his once. 7 floors of legitimate business masking an empire built on fear, extortion, and bodies that disappeared into the Han River. Now it stood empty, sold off months ago to some faceless corporation. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was bleeding out in the skeleton of his own kingdom. Min-jun had ruled Seoul's underworld for nearly a decade. At 38, he commanded respect through calculated brutality. Other gang leaders whispered his name with the kind of reverence reserved for ghosts. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. One phone call could end careers, families, lives. His reputation preceded him into every room like a blade already drawn. But tonight, that reputation meant nothing. Someone had betrayed him. The meeting was supposed to be routine, a territory negotiation with the Busan crew. Instead, he'd walked into an execution. His own driver had locked the car doors from the outside. His bodyguard had stepped aside when the first shots were fired. Min-jun had barely escaped through a service exit, taking a bullet that should have killed him. Before the story continues, kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the conclusion of this story and more intense stories like this. He climbed to the 4th floor, each step sending lightning bolts of pain through his torso. His phone was gone, dropped somewhere in the chaos. His gun had 2 bullets left. Against how many? 5? 10? He didn't know anymore. The stairwell door opened onto a dark hallway lined with empty offices. Emergency exit signs cast everything in a sickly green glow. Min-jun moved carefully, quietly, despite the screaming in his ribs. Survival had always been about patience, about knowing when to strike and when to disappear. He found an unlocked office and slipped inside, closing the door with barely a click. The room was stripped bare except for a few filing cabinets and a desk pushed against the wall. He sank down behind it, finally allowing himself a moment to assess the damage. The bullet had gone through. That was good, but he was losing blood fast, and the exit wound felt like someone had pressed a hot iron against his back. He tore off his tie and pressed it against the hole, hissing through his teeth. Think. Who ordered this? Who had the balls? The Busan crew wouldn't move without approval from higher up. That meant someone in his own organization had greenlit his assassination. Someone close. Someone who knew his schedule, his routes, his routines. Park Sung-ho. His right hand for 6 years. The man he trusted with codes, contacts, collections. Min-jun's jaw tightened. If Sung-ho wanted the throne, he'd have to pry it from Min-jun's cold hands. And Min-jun didn't plan on dying tonight. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on tile. He readied his gun, counting the shadows passing under the door gap. 4 men. Maybe 5. They moved methodically, checking each office. Professional. Sung-ho had sent professionals. The footsteps passed his door. Kept going. Min-jun exhaled slowly. Then he heard something else. Something that didn't belong in this moment of calculated violence. A baby crying. The sound was faint, distant, coming from somewhere above him. 5th floor, maybe 6th. It cut through the silence like a knife, innocent and terrifying in its vulnerability. What the hell was a baby doing here? The men in the hallway heard it too. Their footsteps stopped. Muffled voices, urgent and confused. Then they moved again, this time toward the stairwell, heading up. Min-jun stayed perfectly still. The baby's cries grew louder for a moment, then suddenly stopped. He heard doors opening and closing above. Angry shouts. Someone barked orders in dialect he recognized as Busan accent. Then a woman's scream, quickly muffled. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Min-jun found himself standing. The pain in his side flared white-hot, but he ignored it. He moved to the door, cracked it open, listened. Silence now. Heavy, oppressive silence. He should stay hidden. Should wait them out. Should focus on his own survival because that's what he'd always done. Min-jun didn't save people. He used them. He removed them. He certainly didn't risk his life for strangers. But that scream. He'd heard a lot of screams in his life. Most of them he'd caused. This one was different. It carried a mother's terror, raw and primal. Minjun stepped into the hallway, gun raised, and headed for the stairs. The 5th floor was darker than the 4th. Half the emergency lights were dead, creating pools of shadow between dim green islands. He moved through them like a predator, every sense heightened despite the blood loss making his vision swim. A storage room door stood ajar at the end of the hall. That's where the crying had come from. He approached it carefully, leading with his weapon. Inside, he found blankets arranged into a makeshift bed, baby bottles, diapers, a small portable heater that was still warm. Someone had been living here, hiding here. He heard movement behind him and spun, gun aimed at center mass. A woman stood frozen in the hallway, her dark hands raised, her eyes wide with terror. She wore a cleaner's uniform, the blue smock stained with what looked like formula. She was maybe 30, with braided hair pulled back tight and exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She was trembling, her gaze locked on the gun pointed at her chest. Minjun saw her lips moving, whispering something that sounded like prayer. Not Korean. English maybe, or something else entirely. "Where's the baby?" he asked in Korean, his voice rough. She didn't respond, just stared at him with those terrified eyes, her hands shaking in the air. He switched to broken English. "Baby? Where?" Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something worse than fear. Grief. Her knees buckled slightly, and she clutched the doorframe to stay upright. "They took," she whispered, her accent thick and unfamiliar. "Men. They took my baby." Minjun lowered the gun slightly. His mind raced through calculations. The men who'd passed through here were hunting him, not babies. They must have grabbed the child to keep the mother quiet. Or as leverage. Or just because chaos was easier to work with than witnesses. He should leave. Should slip past this woman and find another exit. Her problems weren't his problems. But he heard himself asking, how many men? She held up 4 fingers. Her whole body was shaking now. Please. Please, she is just baby. She don't see nothing. She don't know nothing. Which way did they go? The woman pointed down the hallway, toward the executive offices at the far end. The corner suite. Minjun knew it well. He'd tortured someone there once, years ago. Big windows, multiple exits, good sight lines of the street below. Bad place to mount a rescue. Good place for an ambush. "Stay here," he ordered. But when he moved forward, she followed. He turned, ready to tell her to stop, but the look on her face made him pause. It was the look of someone who'd already lost everything and had nothing left to fear. He recognized it. He'd seen it in mirrors after his own childhood burned away. "You'll get yourself killed," he said. "Already dead if she gone," the woman replied. Her English was getting clearer as the shock wore off. "You go, I go." Minjun studied her for a long moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He made a decision based on something other than self-interest. "Stay behind me. Don't make noise. If shooting starts, you run opposite direction. Understand?" She nodded. They moved down the hallway together, an unlikely pair. A crime lord bleeding out, and a cleaner who shouldn't exist in this building. Minjun's side screamed with each step, but he kept his gun steady. The executive suite door was closed, but not locked. He could hear voices inside. Male voices, casual and relaxed. They thought they'd won. He looked back at the woman, held up 3 fingers, mouthed the count. 1, 2, 3. Minjun kicked the door open and fired in the same motion. The first bullet caught one man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second bullet shattered the window behind them, deliberately high. He wanted chaos, not corpses. Not yet. The men scattered, drawing weapons, shouting. Minjun saw the baby immediately. Sitting on the floor in the corner, miraculously quiet, sucking on her tiny fist. She couldn't have been more than 8 months old. "Next one dies," Minjun announced in Korean, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 kept promises. The men froze. 3 of them now, all armed. The one he'd shot was on the ground, cursing and clutching his shoulder. These weren't Sung-ho's top tier. They were contractors, mercenaries, men who worked for money, not loyalty. "You know who I am?" Minjun asked. The recognition dawned slowly across their faces. Then the fear. "Kong Minjun," one of them whispered. "Put the guns down." They hesitated. Behind him, Minjun heard the mother's sharp intake of breath. She'd seen her baby. Every muscle in her body was probably screaming to run forward, to grab her child. But she stayed back. Smart woman. Your employer is already dead, Min Jun lied smoothly. You work for a ghost. Put down the guns and walk away. Or become ghosts yourselves. The bluff worked. It always did with mercenaries. They weren't paid enough to die for someone else's vendetta. One by one, the guns clattered to the floor. Go, Min Jun ordered. They went, helping their wounded companion, not looking back. Min Jun waited until their footsteps faded completely down the stairwell before lowering his own weapon. The woman rushed past him, falling to her knees beside her baby. She scooped the child up, clutching her close, rocking and weeping and speaking in rapid, musical syllables Min Jun didn't understand. The baby, seeming to finally realize something had been wrong, began to cry too. Min Jun leaned against the doorframe, suddenly aware of how much blood he'd lost. The room tilted slightly. He pressed his hand harder against his side, felt fresh warmth seeping through his fingers. The woman looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you. He wanted to tell her not to thank him. That he was the reason men like those existed in Seoul. That his empire had probably destroyed 100 families just like hers. That saving one baby didn't balance any scales. Instead, he just nodded. You need to leave this building, he said. More will come. You are hurt, she observed, standing with the baby on her hip. She moved toward him with surprising boldness, given what she'd just witnessed. You need hospital. Can't go to hospital. You will die. Probably. She stared at him. This small Nigerian woman with someone else's baby and someone else's pain written across her face. Then she made a decision that would change both their lives. I help you, she said. I am nurse. Before I come here. Before cleaning job. I was nurse in Lagos. Min Jun wanted to refuse. Accepting help meant debt. Debt meant leverage. Leverage meant weakness. But his vision was graying at the edges, and he could feel his heartbeat slowing down in that dangerous way that preceded unconsciousness. Downstairs, he managed. Storage room where you were. Medical supplies. She shook her head. Only baby things. But cleaning supplies, yes. Alcohol. Clean cloth. She adjusted the baby higher on her hip. Come. Before you fall. Min Jun pushed off from the doorframe and immediately regretted it. The room spun violently. He felt her hand grip his arm, surprisingly strong for someone so small. Together they made their way back down the hallway, her supporting more of his weight than he wanted to admit. The storage room felt smaller with 2 adults and a baby inside. The woman laid her child gently in the makeshift crib, surrounding her with rolled blankets so she couldn't crawl away. Then she turned her attention to Min Jun. Sit, she commanded, pointing to an overturned crate. He sat. She knelt beside him, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she peeled away his ruined shirt. The wound looked worse in the dim light. The entry point was a neat hole, but the exit wound was ragged, angry. Bullet went through. This is good, she said, her nurse's training overriding her fear. But you lose too much blood. Need stitches. Need antibiotics. Need. Work with what you have, Min Jun interrupted. She disappeared into the hallway and returned moments later with a cleaning cart. From it she extracted bottles of rubbing alcohol, rolls of paper towels, duct tape, and a box cutter still in its packaging. This will hurt, she warned. Everything hurts. She poured alcohol over the wounds without ceremony. Min Jun's vision went white. He bit down on his own hand to keep from crying out, tasting blood where his teeth broke skin. The baby started fussing at the commotion. Sorry, sorry. The woman murmured, though Min Jun wasn't sure if she was talking to him or the child. She worked quickly, packing the wounds with clean paper towels, then binding them tight with strips torn from a spare cleaning smock. It wasn't proper medical treatment, but it would slow the bleeding. You need real hospital, she said again, sitting back on her heels. This only by time. Time is all I need. Min Jun's breathing was steadier now. The immediate danger of bleeding out had passed. What's your name? She hesitated, as if giving him her name meant something permanent. Amara. Amara, he repeated. The syllables felt foreign in his mouth. Why were you living here? In storage room with baby. Her jaw tightened. No choice. Apartment too expensive. Landlord want me out. I work night cleaning, sleep day in room at church. But church say no baby. Too much noise. Disturb others. She glanced at her daughter. So I bring her here. Hide her while I clean. Is only few hours each night. She usually sleep. The company doesn't know? Company doesn't see me. Nobody see cleaner. We are invisible. There was no bitterness in her voice, just statement of fact. Minjun understood invisibility. He'd built an empire on it. The invisible money flowing through invisible channels. The invisible violence that kept everyone in line. People only saw what they wanted to see. How long you been in Korea? He asked. 3 years. I come for better life. Send money to family in Nigeria. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Better life. I clean toilets and hide my baby in storage room. The baby's father? Amara's expression closed off completely. Dead. The single word carried volumes. Minjun didn't press. He knew death intimately. Knew how it could end conversations, relationships, entire lives with one brutal period at the end of a sentence. The baby started crying in earnest now, hungry or scared or both. Amara stood and lifted her daughter, bouncing gently, humming something low and melodic. The child quieted almost immediately, her tiny fist grabbing at her mother's braids. Minjun watched them, feeling something unfamiliar stir in his chest. When was the last time someone had touched him with gentleness? When was the last time he'd been in a room where the dominant emotion wasn't fear? He thought back to his own childhood. The orphanage in Taegu where love was rationed and violence was currency. The older boys who'd taught him that mercy was weakness. The social worker who'd looked right through him, another invisible person nobody wanted to see. He'd clawed his way out of that invisibility through blood and calculation. Made himself too dangerous to ignore, too powerful to overlook. But somewhere in that transformation, he'd lost the ability to recognize tenderness, to accept it, to give it. Until tonight. Until a baby grabbed his leg in a hallway and refused to let go. Wait, that hadn't happened yet. Minjun's thoughts were getting muddled, blood loss and exhaustion pulling him toward unconsciousness. He shook his head, trying to clear it. You should go, he told Amara. Take your daughter and leave. This building isn't safe. Where I go? Church close at midnight. I have no money for hotel. You have money now. Minjun reached into his jacket pocket with his good hand and pulled out a money clip. It held maybe 3 million won, pocket change from his perspective. He held it out to her. She stared at the money like it might bite her. I cannot take this. You saved my life. That's worth more than some cash. You saved my baby. We are even. We're not even. Minjun's voice was harder now. Take the money. Get a hotel. Stay there until tomorrow night. Then come back if you want your job. Amara reached out slowly and took the clip. Her fingers brushed his, warm and alive. Why you do this? You are gangster. I see your gun. I see how those men fear you. You are bad man, yes. Minjun smiled, and it felt strange on his face, muscles and used to the expression. Yes, I'm a very bad man. But you saved my baby. Don't make me a saint, Amara. I've done things that would give you nightmares. She looked at him for a long moment, her daughter drowsy now against her shoulder. Maybe, but tonight, you are my angel. Before Minjun could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Multiple sets, moving fast. Amara's eyes went wide with fear. Back exit, Minjun said, forcing himself to stand despite the protest from his wounded side. You know one. She nodded quickly. Service corridor. End of hall. Goes to loading dock. Show me. They moved as quietly as possible, Amara clutching her baby, Minjun gripping his gun. His makeshift bandage was already seeping through, warm and wet against his skin. The hallway seemed longer than before, stretching endlessly toward the service corridor. Behind them, the stairwell door crashed open. Voices shouted in Korean, more professional than the last group. These were Sung-ho's real soldiers. There, 5th floor. Minjun grabbed Amara's arm and pulled her into the service corridor just as gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets punched through drywall, showering them with dust and debris. The baby screamed, a piercing wail that cut through everything. The corridor was narrow, lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Emergency lighting flickered overhead, casting everything in strobe-like intervals of darkness and sickly yellow. Minjun could hear his pursuers entering the corridor behind them. Run, he told Amara. Don't stop. Don't look back. What about you? I'll slow them down. She hesitated, her maternal instinct warring with self-preservation. The baby's cries made the decision for her. She ran. Minjun positioned himself behind a support column and waited. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. He counted silently. 3 men, maybe 4. He had no bullets left. His gun was empty, fired dry in the executive suite. But they didn't know that. When the first man rounded the corner, Minjun aimed at his head. Stop or die. The man froze. His companions behind him tensed, weapons raised but hesitant. Kong Minjun, the lead man said. He was young, maybe 25, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. Park Sung-ho sends his regards. Tell Park Sung-ho he should have sent better men. The young man smiled. He sent plenty. Building is surrounded. You're bleeding out. You're finished. Then why are you talking instead of shooting? The smile faltered. Sung-ho wants you alive. Wants to look you in the eye when he takes everything you built. Minjun laughed, and it hurt his wound, but he didn't care. Sung-ho was always theatrical. Tell him I'll save him the trouble. He pulled the trigger on an empty chamber. The click echoed in the corridor. The young man's eyes widened as he realized the bluff. But Minjun was already moving, using the split second of confusion to close the distance. He slammed the empty gun into the man's temple, grabbed his wrist, and twisted the armed hand backward until fingers broke and the weapon clattered free. The other men fired, but Minjun was using their companion as a shield now, dragging him backward down the corridor. Bullets meant for Minjun found their comrade instead. The young man jerked and spasmed, his blood spraying hot across Minjun's face. Minjun reached the service door and shoved the dying man forward into his former allies. They stumbled, tangled in their friend's falling body. It bought seconds. Sometimes seconds were enough. He burst through the door into the loading dock. Amara was there, standing frozen beside a dumpster, her baby crying against her chest. Rain poured through the open bay, turning the concrete black and slick. I told you to run, Minjun gasped. I don't know where to run, she said simply. Headlights flooded the loading dock. A black sedan pulled in fast, tires squealing. The passenger window rolled down and Minjun found himself staring at Park Sung-ho's weathered face. Get in, Sung-ho said. Minjun raised the gun he'd taken from the young man, aimed it at his former friend, his betrayer. Sung-ho didn't flinch. You can shoot me, or you can save the woman and child. Your choice. But those men are coming through that door in about 5 seconds. As if summoned by his words, the service door crashed open. Shouts. Running feet. Minjun grabbed Amara and shoved her toward the sedan. Get in the back. Get down. Cover the baby. She scrambled into the car without question. Minjun followed, sliding in beside her, his gun still trained on Sung-ho. The driver hit the accelerator before the door was fully closed. They rocketed out of the loading dock into the rain-soaked Seoul night. Gunfire chased them, sparking off the trunk. The rear window exploded inward, showering them with glass. Amara curled over her baby, shielding her with her entire body. The sedan swerved through narrow alleys, the driver clearly skilled at high-speed pursuit evasion. After several minutes of violent turns and heart-stopping near misses, they emerged onto a main road. The driver eased off slightly, falling into the flow of late-night traffic. In the back seat, Minjun kept his gun pressed against Sung-ho's headrest. Explain. Now. Sung-ho lit a cigarette, his hands perfectly steady. Put the gun down, Minjun. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. You ordered the hit. No. I discovered the hit. There's a difference. Sung-ho exhaled smoke. Kim Jae-sung from Busan made a deal with 3 of our captains. They were going to split your territory 4 ways. I found out yesterday. Why should I believe you? Because I'm the one who called in the tip about the abandoned building. I knew you'd go there to hide. I pulled the real hit squad off the building perimeter 30 minutes ago. Those men you encountered were low-level contractors, easy to avoid. Sung-ho turned slightly in his seat. I've been loyal to you for 6 years. Why would I betray you now? Power. Money. Take your pick. Sung-ho laughed, a dry sound like crumpling paper. If I wanted power, I'd have taken it years ago when you were recovering from the Incheon incident. You were vulnerable then. Weak. I protected you instead. He glanced in the rearview mirror. I'm protecting you now. Minjun's gun hand wavered slightly. The Incheon incident. 3 years ago, a rival gang had poisoned him at a negotiation dinner. He'd spent 2 weeks in a private clinic, delirious and defenseless. Sung-ho had run the organization flawlessly, never once making a move toward the throne. The captains, Min Jun said. Names: Choi Min-sik, Lee Dong-hyun, and your cousin, Young Ho-suk. The last name hit like a physical blow. Ho-suk, his mother's sister's son. The only family Min Jun had left in this world. The boy he'd pulled out of debt and given a position of trust. You're lying. I have recordings, bank transfers, meeting transcripts. Sung-ho's voice was almost gentle. I'm sorry, Min Jun. I know what he meant to you. Amara shifted slightly beside him, and Min Jun suddenly remembered she was there, a witness to his unraveling. The baby had stopped crying, exhausted into sleep despite the chaos. In the strobing streetlights, Min Jun could see the child's face clearly for the first time. Round cheeks, impossibly long eyelashes, completely innocent of the violent world swirling around her. Where are we going? He asked. Safe house in Gangnam. Medical team is waiting. Real doctors, not just cleaning women playing nurse. Sung-ho said it without malice, merely stating facts. Amara stiffened beside him, but said nothing. They drove in silence for several minutes. The rain continued its relentless assault on the windshield. Seoul blurred past, neon signs reflecting off wet pavement like watercolor paintings. Min Jun had built his empire in this city. Knew every district, every alley, every pocket of shadow where deals were made and bodies were buried. Now it all felt alien, foreign, like he was seeing it for the first time through different eyes. The woman and child, Sung-ho said eventually. They were in the building? She works there. Cleaner. Unfortunate timing. Min Jun looked at Amara, at the way she held her daughter even in sleep, protective and fierce. She saved my life. Then I suppose we owe her compensation. We'll arrange. No. The word came out harder than Min Jun intended. She doesn't get pulled into this. She walks away clean. Sung-ho raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. As you wish. The safe house was a luxury apartment building in one of Gangnam's quieter neighborhoods. The kind of place where residents minded their own business and security cameras had convenient blind spots. They took a private elevator directly to the penthouse. Inside, two men in surgical scrubs waited with medical equipment already laid out on the dining room table. They worked with the brisk efficiency of people accustomed to treating gunshot wounds without asking questions. Min Jun sat on the table while they cut away Amara's makeshift bandaging. One of the doctors whistled low. You should be dead with this much blood loss. Disappointing people is a specialty, Min Jun replied. They cleaned the wounds properly, stitched both entry and exit points, started in 4 drip for blood volume and antibiotics. The local anesthetic they injected barely touched the pain, but Min Jun had learned long ago how to compartmentalize suffering. Amara stood in the corner, still holding her sleeping baby, looking completely out of place in the expensive penthouse. She watched the medical procedure with a nurse's critical eye, occasionally nodding approval at the doctor's technique. When they finished, one of the doctors turned to her. The child should be examined. Make sure she wasn't injured in the chaos. Amara hesitated, then nodded. She laid her daughter gently on the sofa while the doctor performed a quick check. The baby woke briefly, fussed, then settled back into sleep when her mother hummed that same melodic tune from earlier. She's fine, the doctor announced. Healthy baby. Maybe a little underweight, but nothing concerning. Sung-ho had been making phone calls in another room. He returned now, sliding his phone into his pocket. The captains are being rounded up as we speak. Should have them all by morning. And Ho-suk. He ran. Got word somehow that we knew. He's probably halfway to Busan by now. Min Jun nodded slowly. His cousin. His blood. The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet wound. Find him. I don't care how long it takes. Already on it. Sung-ho glanced at Amara. What about her? Min Jun looked at the woman who'd bandaged his wounds with cleaning supplies and prayer. The woman who'd chosen to stay behind when she should have run. The woman who'd thanked him even after watching him threaten to kill men without hesitation. She needs somewhere safe to stay. Somewhere far from this. I can arrange an apartment. Monthly stipend. New identity papers if needed. No, Amara said quietly. Both men turned to look at her. She stood straighter, despite her exhaustion, despite her fear. I don't want money for silence. I don't want to be in debt to gangsters. It's not debt, Min Jun said. It's gratitude. Gratitude that comes with strings. Favors owed. I know how this works. She shifted her daughter higher on her hip. I want nothing from you except to forget I exist. You saved his life, Sung-ho pointed out. That earns consideration. I saved a man. I didn't save a monster. Amara's voice was steady now, the initial terror burned away by something harder. Conviction maybe. Or just exhaustion that had moved past caring about consequences. I don't know what you do. I don't want to know. I just want to take my baby and go back to being invisible. Minjun studied her for a long moment. Most people crumbled under his attention, reading danger in his eyes. But Amara met his gaze without flinching. She wasn't brave. She was terrified. He could see it in the tension of her shoulders, the white-knuckle grip on her daughter. But she was choosing dignity over safety. He respected that more than he wanted to admit. You think you can just walk away? Minjun asked. You've seen faces. Heard names. You know where this safe house is located. I will forget everything. I am good at forgetting. There was pain in those words, old wounds reopening. I forget my nursing degree when I clean toilets. I forget my husband when I hold my daughter. I forget my country when I wake up in Korea. I can forget tonight too. Sung-ho shook his head. It's not that simple. You're a liability now. Then kill me. Amara said it flatly, without drama. Kill me and raise my daughter in orphanage. Give her the same life you had. She looked directly at Minjun. I see it in your eyes. You know that pain. You know what it does to children. The room fell silent except for the baby's soft breathing. Minjun did know. He knew exactly what it did. How it hollowed you out and filled the empty space with rage. How it taught you that survival meant becoming something hard and sharp and cruel. Let her go, he said finally. Sung-ho's jaw tightened. That's a mistake. My mistake to make. She could talk. Could go to police. She won't. Minjun was certain of this in a way he couldn't fully explain. She has too much to lose. Amara nodded slowly. I never see you. I never hear you. Tonight never happens. One condition, Minjun said. You stop living in that storage room. You find real apartment. You take care of that baby properly. With what money? I told you, I don't want your. Not mine. Yours. Minjun gestured to Sung-ho. The cleaning company. You'll arrange a raise. Market rate for night shift supervisor. Nothing that raises suspicion. Sung-ho sighed, but pulled out his phone. I'll make the call. Amara looked like she wanted to argue, but practicality won over pride. She needed the money. Needed stability for her daughter. Sometimes accepting help wasn't weakness. It was survival. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me. Just disappear. Minjun turned away, the dismissal clear. He couldn't look at her anymore. Couldn't look at that baby. They reminded him of things he'd spent years burying. Sung-ho arranged for a car to take Amara home. She left without looking back, her baby sleeping against her shoulder, walking out of Minjun's life as suddenly as she'd entered it. When she was gone, Sung-ho poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Minjun. That was sentimental. That was practical. Dead witnesses create investigations. Live witnesses who feel grateful keep quiet. If you say so. Sung-ho didn't sound convinced. The doctors want you to rest for at least 48 hours. Let the stitches set. I don't have 48 hours. I have traitors to deal with. The traitors aren't going anywhere. They're in cells right now, waiting for your judgment. Sung-ho sipped his whiskey. You, on the other hand, are barely standing. Rest. Heal. Then we handle business. Minjun wanted to argue, but his body was already making the decision for him. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only pain and exhaustion. He drained the whiskey in one swallow and felt it burn all the way down. Wake me in 6 hours, he said. 12. 8. 10. And that's final. Sung-ho smiled slightly. You're not as scary when you can barely stand. Minjun allowed himself to be led to a bedroom. The mattress felt like heaven after the hard floor of the storage room. He was asleep before Sung-ho closed the door. He dreamed of blood and broken glass. Dreamed of the orphanage in Daegu where older boys had taught him that mercy was weakness. Dreamed of his first kill, the way the man's eyes had gone wide with surprise, as if he couldn't believe a 15-year-old could pull a trigger. But mostly he dreamed of a baby's hand grabbing his leg, of innocent fingers that didn't know they were touching a monster. When he woke, pale morning light filtered through expensive curtains. His side ached with a deep, throbbing pain that the medication couldn't quite touch. But he was alive. That was more than he'd expected 12 hours ago. Sung-ho was waiting in the living room with coffee and a tablet full of reports. The captains are talking, trying to bargain their way out. Choi is blaming Lee. Lee is blaming Choi. Min-sik claims he was coerced. And Ho-suk, still in the wind. But we tracked his phone to a motel in Busan. Team is moving in now. Min-jun took the coffee, let the heat ground him. I want to see the captains. Today. You're not healed enough for. Today, Sung-ho. His lieutenant nodded. They both knew how this would end. Betrayal in their world had only one punishment. Min-jun had built his empire on that simple, brutal principle. Show weakness once, and everyone would test you. Show mercy once, and you'd be dead within a week. But as he dressed carefully, mindful of his stitches, Min-jun found his thoughts drifting to Amara, wondering if she'd made it home safely, if her baby was warm and fed, if she was already forgetting him, erasing last night from her memory like she'd learned to erase so many other painful things. He hoped she was. Hoped she'd take her raise and find a better apartment. Hoped her daughter would grow up never knowing that her mother had once stood in a penthouse with killers and chosen dignity over fear. The world Min-jun inhabited didn't allow for hope, didn't have room for sentiment or second chances. But somehow, in the space of one chaotic night, a woman and her baby had cracked something open inside him, something he'd thought was sealed shut forever. He touched his side, felt the bandages beneath his shirt. Amara had saved his life with cleaning supplies and steady hands, had looked at him with tears streaming down her face and called him an angel. No one had ever called him that before. No one ever would again. Min-jun picked up his gun, checked the magazine, and headed for the door. He had traitors to execute, an empire to secure, a reputation to maintain. But deep in some forgotten corner of his chest, where his heart supposedly still beat, he carried the memory of a baby's cry in an abandoned building. The sound of innocence in a place where innocence had no business existing. He carried it like a scar, like a wound that would never quite heal. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. To enjoy more stories, kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more intense stories like this.